And let's see how the market closed last week in Nigeria. The all share yesterday went up almost 4%. It was a huge movement that we saw, positive movement I must add. At 3.94%, the all share gained at the close of the 5 trading day of last week to 225,722. Equity cap was up 145.335 trillion naira, and we saw the banking, the most liquid counter was the most active there. It gained 6.81%. We'll talk about one of the major players there in a few minutes. Consumer goods was also up 5.25%, industrial goods 7.7%, insurance 0.4%, and oil and gas. Top gainers were USCN PLC, Union Dye Consult, and NASCON Allied Industry. On the flip side, we had Infinity Trust Mortgage Bank, Abe Mortgage Bank, and Guinea Insurance. Top trades was the banking. We saw that movement there. Access Holdings, United Bank for Africa, and First Holdco. I'm talking about the top trades. Let's settle on one of them, United Bank for Africa. We saw on Friday, we saw their results. And of course, it's gotten a lot of attention and reactions. Perhaps that's even one reason that we see it on the top trade. So we saw the first quarter results, financial results of United Bank for Africa for the quarter ended March 31, 2026. We saw profit after tax 146.64, profit before tax. We saw the gross earnings and interest income, non-interest income, operating income. We saw 9.4% increase in total assets. 33.2 trillion naira. Customer deposit also went up almost 12%. And then, of course, we saw profit after tax right there. But let's settle in more on these results. Perhaps some questions that you've been asking and you want answers to. We have the Group Managing Director of UBA, Mr. Oliver Alauba, joining us virtually from Lagos. Mr. Alauba, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning,
Yes.
Good to be here.
Good to have you too. So generally, of course, we've seen the numbers, but what do these numbers mean if you were to explain to your customers and your shareholders?
Okay, so we on Friday released our 2025 results, and from that number, you would see that the core business of the bank remained very strong. We're talking about a bank with a gross earning of 3 trillion and beyond, and a very diversified franchise across geographies, 24 in the world, 20 in Africa, and 4 in key financial centers. You just mentioned about the deposit growth. We saw deposit growth about 12%, moving up to 27.3 trillion naira. And that gives you liquidity, and that gives you capacity to even begin to lend more. We also saw that even the operating income is also very strong at over 1 trillion naira. The shareholders' fund of the bank went up by 9.4% to 4.3 trillion. And what that does is that gives you a robust base. And when you combine that with the fact that the capital adequacy ratio was 23.2%, that is capacity to grow for growth, and that is also capacity to absorb any losses that may occur in the future. And also the total assets at 33 trillion is also point to the fact that UBA remains a very strong brand in the financial space.
Yeah, so I know you must have heard this question. Investors were looking forward. I mean, when you have this amount of profit after tax, why no dividend?
Yes, I think that's a very important question for investors in Nigeria and globally. You would know that UBA has had this long history of dividend payment. And in most cases, you saw dividend going up to a dividend yield of about a double digit. We did in 2023, we paid dividend of 2 naira 80 kobo, and we had a dividend yield of 12%. In 2024, indeed, we paid dividend of 3 naira 25 kobo, and we had a dividend yield of close to 15%. Then in 2025, first first half, we paid 25 naira dividend, 25 kobo dividend. So customers were expecting to have a final dividend that will be that robust enough as usual. But that didn't happen. And the reason is actually why. And that's very important for shareholders to know. So what happened is that in 2025, the Central Bank of Nigeria decided that banks should exit the forbearance loan regime. And UBA was one of the banks that did so. We exited that window, and in line with regulatory prudential guidelines, we also made a provision of about 331 billion. Making such a huge provision also spiked a bit on the non-performing loan ratio, so that we were not able to pay dividend because of that non-performing ratio. But the good news is that we have taken that in, because that is a reset, and that is actually a one-off incident, and it is non-recurring. So in this year, we are now pursuing those recoveries from these customers. As you pursue those recoveries and get those loans come back, it will moderate the NPL. And we're also going to get a right back in 2026 and going forward in 2027. That right back will also be an impact, a positive impact in our income and profit for 2026. So we expect to pay dividend in 2026 and going forward.
Yeah, well, it's good for investors to hear that. Obviously, I know you've gotten a lot of that reaction, but other than the dividends, what else can your investors and customers expect this year? I know first quarter is over.
Yes, so you expect that the core business of the bank is strong. You expect that core business of the bank is strong and is growing. Like I mentioned, our presence in Africa is yielding a lot of dividend to us, in the sense that in West Africa, for example, we've seen the profit grow last year by over 52%. In East and Southern Africa, the profit of our businesses there have grown by 61%. So that diversified portfolio that UBA has cushioned it from any loss in terms of earnings, and that also positions the bank to do more. So we expect this year to have dividend coming, because the capacity of the bank to do more is totally there, and then that will also yield more profit, yield more dividend going forward for the shareholders and investors around the world.
And you know, the sector just concluded the recap, and the CBN said it was a success. But for Nigerians, for the real economy, it's not a success until the impact is felt. What can we expect with this extra liquidity that the banking sector has gathered?
I think we have to commend the Central Bank of Nigeria for coming with that initiative in 2024 for the capitalization of the industry. I think the Central Bank acted as like they saw today, because if you see what's going on around the world, the activities in Iran and the impact that's having in the economy and bringing a lot of uncertainties, that is actually what's happening. And the central bank has positioned the industry to withstand all those losses on those uncertainties that are affecting the financial industries around the world. So the first gain is that you have a strong banking industry that can withstand any uncertainties that's coming from the world. That's very important to underline. Second point on the capitalization is that you now have the banking industry that is strong enough to now finance key projects in infrastructure, in manufacturing, in oil and gas, that will be able to activate the economy of Nigeria towards the $1 trillion GDP economy that we're positioning to go. And it is also important to note that SME financing is important for the economy. And having a recapitalized banking industry positioned us to provide that finance for the SME. And we have a lot of our young youths with ideas. Those ideas we have to invest in them. And invest in them, we need banks, need strong banks to do that. Then it's important in this age of digital technology, and that you have banking industries that are able to invest more in technology and to be able to drive financial inclusion into the economy of Nigeria. So it is a very good thing that Central Bank of Nigeria has done, and I'm happy that the success has been commended by everyone. Recently, I know the Central Bank governor won the Central Bank Governor of the Year for the whole world, and I think it's coming from this congratulation exercise that's well executed and concluded. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess the next thing you have to do is to plead with the central bank on the cost of funding, because I know they regulate how much you charge for those funds, because if the funds are there but they are too expensive, then even those small businesses may not be able to access it.
No, you can be sure that is happening, because you have seen that the interest rate projection is reducing. The interest is coming down. So what that happens, that once that interest rate begins to come down, that will drive banks to begin to lend at good interest rate to the private sector, and that will drive that SME you are talking about. So it will happen.
All right, we look forward to that. Thank you so much. Group Managing Director of United Bank for Africa, Mr. Oliver Alauba.
Thank you for having me.